Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the second part of What If Naruto Fell for Marika. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Time waits for neither mortal nor god. There was a certain irony to be had there, Naruto felt. Time was the one thing he'd never cared for in the past. Why would he? Those of the Uzumaki clan had an absurdly long lifespan to begin with and that was before he'd met Marika. Since then he'd become all but a god in blood thanks to his time in the lands between. Yet now he found himself wishing he had more of it. It almost felt like a dream. Where had it all gone? 5 years, vanished in the blink of an eye. The twins were getting older, stronger, and yet in some ways, they were so very much the same. Cold steel whistled in at his neck, unleashing a shockwave in its wake. Stray strands of golden hair fluttered the ground as he evaded it. He swayed half an inch to the right and felt the breeze of her blade whistle harmlessly by. Glimpsed his own smiling reflection grinning back at him within and Melinia's blessed blade as it hurtled past his head. Fast. She'd improved once again, he'd give her that. At this rate she'd be able to topple buildings with a single swing. Scary little redhead. So you've chosen a longsword this time? Him. His spine arched near parallel to the ground for all of an instant, kicking back to vault away now when she cut out at his legs. Wise choice. He alighted upon a nearby pillar some yards away, only to hop off when she cut that in half, too. It helps you make up for your lack of reach. However, Melinia blitzed. Rather than retreat, Naruto stepped aside and swung a foot out to trip her up. In her haste to get at him, she blundered right into it, turning her impressive charge into a stuttering stumble that left her wide open. In the same instant Naruto pivoted and brought a fist swinging down on his daughter's head with an anvil's worth of weight. To her credit, Melinia tried to course correct. Really, truly did. She just wasn't quite quick enough. The very moment she saw his arms swing back she gave up all pretense of attack and herself to the side. Exactly as he knew she would. He tracked with the movement and his fist thundered down into her still too large helm, knocking it over her eyes to blind her. She went down with a girlish yelp to clutch at her head. He watched her for a moment. What did you do wrong? She lifted her helmet to scowl at him. That hurt. It's meant to. He waved his fist before her face. I'll say it again. What did you do wrong? Her brow furrowed, squinting in the afternoon sunlight. I tried to dodge. Precisely. He booped her nose with a finger. Do or do not. There is no try. When you act, commit yourself to it. You need to work on your footwork. Her face closed down. I'll get better. Of that he had no doubts. She made his younger self seem slow by comparison. Give her a few more years, time to polish her skills, see the world, become a little less worldly and well. She'd make a remarkable warrior someday. Perhaps even a queen when Marika grew tired of ruling. She might even find someone to rule beside her in the far-flung future. Kurama huffed. You just want grandkids. I wouldn't say no. I know you will. He reached down for her and she grasped his hand, pulling herself upright. Why do you insist on wearing that ridiculous helmet? I'll grow into it eventually. She adjusted it with a rueful look. Didn't you tell me to protect my head in combat? I did, he granted her a bemused nod. But that thing's still a little too you know. Melinia removed her Valkyrie helm and hugged it to her chest, suddenly afraid he'd take it away. Master Hugh made it for me. Naruto considered it with a frown. Watched her now as she donned it anew. Thunk. Oh, little Melinia recoiled with a yelp, cradling her head once more. What was that for? Testing its integrity. He withdrew his steaming fist. I've hit that thing twice now, and still not a dent. Old Smith knows his stuff. But it hurt. You still have your head, don't you? Father. She pouted. You're not this rough with Miquella. A low tremor rattled the other side of Capital, punctuated by low laughter. You're right. Naruto grinned, even as Melinia balked. Marika's even harder on your brother. Now move. His fist scythed down before she could protest, splintering the floor and forcing her to scramble away or be mowed down. Pain is something to be avoided ordinarily, but if you can take it, he whirled when she slashed at him, letting him drawing a bloody line across his white tunic. You gain an opportunity. Case in point. His arm hooked around her chin, snapping her head back. Lariat. Melinia rocked backward in a mottled red blur of silk. The comet that was her body struck the southernmost wall of the courtyard with an awful crunch, cratering it. She hung there, back crushed against the stone, arms trapped against her sides. Her sword clattered to the floor out of reach. It would be of no help to her now. A better father would have given her time to recover. Enemies wouldn't give her that time. Melinia wouldn't find her true strength unless her back was, quite literally, against the wall. Sorry, kiddo. Might have to get a bit rough. Naruto stormed in after her and delivered a devastating right hook. An open palm caught his fist. Against all odds, she managed to hold him back. Scarlet sparks stemmed from her shoulders as he looked on, burning a bright cherry red. What was that for? Melinia's head snapped up, golden eyes stained a startling shade of amber. You almost killed me just now. Ah, and there it is. We just had to make her angry. Almost. Naruto grinned despite it and swung down with his other fist, forcing his fiery daughter to catch that one, too. Almost doesn't count, daughter of mine. Radiant wings of pure crimson chakra burst forth from little Melinia's shoulders, buffeting him away. Unsatisfied with her Pyrrhic victory, his daughter growled and burned brighter still, scorching her way free from the wall altogether. She alighted on one knee, fumbling for her sword. A hand came up to clamp her face as she panted harshly for breath. Naruto hummed in appreciation. Don't be afraid to use that power. He grinned down at her. It's yours as much as it is mine. It responds to your emotions, remember. She grimaced and reached up to rub a glowing shoulder. Feels like cheating. It really isn't. You were born with it. In truth, it was something of a miracle Melania possessed it at all. To have inherited even a tiny portion of his power alongside his chakra was a miracle in and of itself. Her faux chakra cloak didn't quite live up to the same moniker as his. It was more a shroud that clung to her body and mirrored her movements like armor. It would never be quite so potent as his, but it spoke further to her status as an Empyrean. He really was raising a little godling, wasn't he? The thought made him smile. She'd be untouchable in a few years. Now hop to it, or no desert tonight. Melania righted herself and lunged at him. Why ... you ... Father and daughter collided and grappled with one another once more, wrestling, gold versus red. His knee crashed into hers, forcing them apart. You need more poise, he chided, warding her blows away while he spoke. Fight harder. Pinched fingers caught her blade and swung it away. Better, faster, stronger. Use every ounce of your training to defeat me, every technique at your disposal. You need to get stronger while you still can. I won't always be here to help you. Her lips thinned. Yes, you will. Kurama sighed. Oh, my sweet summer child. Even gods die eventually. Melania stomped a foot, unaware of what he'd just said, but sensing the sentiment all the same. You'll always be here. Don't act like you're leaving. Oh, dear. He'd stepped on a bit of a landmine here, hadn't he? Might be best to backtrack before things got worse. I ain't. I just want you to be prepared for anything. She scuffed a shoe against the floor and looked to him with watery eyes. Promise? Oh, she looked so small in that moment. He opened his arms. Simir. She rushed into his arms and latched on for dear life. Naruto bit back a rueful smile, knowing that to speak now would have her sputtering and snarling at him. Such a needy little daughter he had. She tried to act tough, to play the part of the stoic Empyrean that she was meant to be. She just couldn't quite muster it. He reached down to pat her back, stroking her long hair. There, you're all right. ... He feared the day she and Miquella received their shadows. It would be coming soon. Ranni had gained Blade early as a child, likely because she'd been the only Empyrean in the lands between at the time. But more and more, the Greater will turned its gaze toward Melania and Miquella. He might have to teach that Twiggy Tree God another lesson before it got too uppity. But that was a matter for another time. I need you to be strong. He spoke slowly instead, choosing his words with great care. You can do that, right? She stepped back with a tiny hiccup. ... Yes, that's my girl. He patted her head. Then show me. Her eyes narrowed into golden slits, shimmering with willpower. That's it. He smiled and let her go. That's the look. Come on, then. His daughter drew her blade back, running one hand across the longsword. Show me. She darted forward, hopped up on one foot, seemed to linger in the very air like a graceful butterfly nope. He caught her by the ankle, swinging her away. She landed hard on her rear, bounced once, scowled his way. This time he didn't pursue. A golden hand waved, ushering her upright. Taking a moment to comport herself, she did just that. Again, Melania drew back. This time, she kept her distance, leaped up into the air, hung there, defying gravity itself. He grabbed for her again, only for his fingers to close around so much smoke. Good. She'd finally used a jutsu. He'd have to hammer that habit into her. Sure enough, she triumphant cry echoed behind him. Waterfowl dance. Oi, he scowled. What did I tell you about shouting out the name of your attacks? His words warped into a startled laugh as his daughter dove on him, raining down dozens of strikes in an instant. Blocking was a mistake. They hammered through his guard and cut into his hands, arms, even his cest wasn't spared the bloody assault. Then she was past, skidding by, rounding on him with a look of absolute horror. Father, she hastened to his side, fumbling in her pack for a roll of bandages. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt. I'm fine. He straightened with a sigh, pumping chakra into his wounds. They'd closed by the time he stood fully. See, no harm, no foul. She fretted a little. Truly, oi, have some faith in your old man. Though it was a bit of a close thing there at the end. Another explosion rattled the courtyard before she could call his bluff. Melania craned her neck towards it. Was that Miquella? I wonder how he fares. Naruto suppressed a grimace as Marika's laughter ran through the air. I'm sure your brother is ... fine. Hammer go down. Not the most eloquent of thoughts, that, but Miquella found it rather prevalent given said hammer was trying to squash him flat. He flung himself forward, rolling under the blow, felt the wind of her weapons passing rush over his head as he tumbled to the cobblestones. A knife slid down his sleeve and landed in his waiting hand. There, she was overextended from her swing, and he was inside her guard. He swung upright, a blur of black robes and pale gold. If he struck now, it availed him not. By the flash of her golden eyes, Mother saw his tactic. She countered with speed and aplomb. Up he came down. He must have blacked out at some point, for he woke to find himself sprawled out in the yard. Listless clouds wafted across the blue sky to bask in the gaze of the Erd-tree. Gazing at them brought him some small manner of peace, if not necessarily from the pain currently aching through his skull. Truly, thou hast improved, my son. Marika's voice congratulated and taunted him in equal measure. Once upon a time, such a blow would have kept thee down. How nice of her to say. Pity he couldn't feel anything. Oh my, he heard her coo. Giving up already. Were you not the one who asked for this? Naquella groaned in imprecation where he lay. He had asked for such, yes. Mayhap this was a mistake. Better to train with Radon, Morgoth, or even father in a pinch. At least they didn't break his everything. Huh, he didn't miss mother's peal of laughter. Now becomest more like thine father every day. ... Is that a compliment? More laughter. Perhaps. Mother raised her weapon and saluted, turning the hammer like a key in the lock before them. Now let us see if you can evade ... This. Motes of golden light rose from the ground, growing larger with each passing moment. Naquella noticed it and blanched. She wasn't going to give him time to rest. Moreover, he recognized that spell. Elden stars. Alone each ember of light did little more than sting, but together they could overwhelm the unprepared. And in Mother's hand. Do dodge this, dear boy. Naquella tumbled aside as a searing beam of coruscating light savaged the space he'd just vacated. Marika met him with laughter and her hammer as he tumbled to his feet. Her swing split heaven and rent the earth, each bringing with it an arc of golden light. No escape. Her hammer was here, there, everywhere. For every blow he dodged, another hurtled through to smack him about. In desperation he grabbed at her hammer, locking it in place against his side. He realized his mistake a moment later when she laughed. Her fist filled his vision. Mother didn't need strategy, but that didn't mean she couldn't employ such when it suited her. And he blundered right into her trap. No time to dodge. Naquella closed his eyes and pulled upon the natural energies around him, just as he'd been taught. Golden eyes burned brighter still, hints of orange dust licking at the edges of his eyelids. And he struck. His fist flew forth in a singular lunge, and for once, he struck true. Clenched knuckles barreled into Mother's solar plexus. She grunted in surprise. Then she was gone. Her back struck a tree and drilled through it, sending her tumbling across the yard. Through the chapel, now. Into a building ... and another. Naquella lowered his fist, considered the ruin before him, winced now as Mother dragged herself out of it. He at least managed to look sheepish. Oops. Marika's head snapped up. Mother, wait. I didn't mean to. She was upon him a moment later. Strong arms closed around him, hefted him from the floor. My baby boy, I'm so proud of thee. You look pleased. Marika was waiting when Naruto came to bed. Sprawled out beneath silken sheets she awaited him, body limned by the faint light of the full moon. He couldn't tell if she was wearing anything underneath. Naruto paused on the threshold of their chamber, briefly struck by the sight of her as he sometimes was these days. In times such as these, the moniker of Eternal really did stick with him. She just didn't seem to age. She was smiling, too. So was he realized. Right, she'd asked him a question, hadn't she? I am. He sat beside her with a small smile. Now Linnea actually managed to hurt me today. Did she? No. She beamed back, wearing a sprightly grin of her own. Dear Naquella sent me flying with a single punch. Naruto bit his lip. Sounds like him. He also swore at me. He scoffed. No. Yes. She thumped a fist against the bed. The boy seems to be picking up your habits, husband. They shared a laugh at that. Will you not come to bed? She cooed softly. Tempting. So very tempting. I just wanted to check in with you. I still need to have a word with. Marika raised the sheet with languid grace. She wasn't wearing anything beneath it. His throat went dry. Well, that's one way to win an argument. Her eyes flashed. Come here before I come to you. She grabbed him by the shoulder and yanked. Clothes flew through the air. In a matter of moments they fell into a familiar rhythm. Some much say such familiarity often breeds contempt. Not so. He'd come to enjoy the little barbs they flung at one another. The constant teasing, the pranks that followed, the bites, the kisses. He rolled over. Have you given any thought to what we discussed? Marika's voice pierced the silence, startling him as she cupped her breasts. A third would certainly make things interesting. I swear, she's obsessed with getting me a harem. She can hear you just fine. Marika draped herself over him again with a pleased purr, and too late, he realized he'd said the words aloud. Come now, you act as if it is a sin to spread your bloodline throughout the world. ... It ain't. Then do not treat it as such. She pulled him back down to the bed and straddled his hips. If I have my way, I shall see your descendants more numerous than the stars themselves. Do you not wish for more children? Little Melinia and Naquella are growing older. He turned away with a sigh. ... Wait. There was a lump in the bed, a decidedly human-shaped lump. He'd not noticed it before, lost in passion as they were. Their bed was large, after all. His gaze snapped to hers. You didn't what, dear consort of mine? Marika's face is the very picture of innocence. He distrusted it at once. Whatever do you mean? Naruto twitched. He tumbled off her, yanked the sheet back and found... Only pillows beneath. Pillows arranged to resemble a vague human figure. He released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For a moment he thought she'd actually done something terribly foolish. Just another one of her pranks, then. She'd gotten him good. Oh? Marika's chin came down over his shoulder. Aren't we jumpy today? He scoffed and shook her off. You're messing with me again. Indeed, I think I outdid myself this time. She really had. For a moment there he thought there was someone else in here. He rolled his eyes. I'll show you doing. Her smile hadn't shrunk at all. Wait, why was she still? Marika snapped her fingers. A door opened. Someone stepped through. Clad in a thin azure gown, her skin gleamed in the moonlight. He had time enough to note a gossamer thin golden gown, pale blue skin, 4 arms, dark hair. Rena. She stood there before them, hesitant, refusing to meet his gaze. She seemed like a skittish colt, ready to bolt if he so much as twitched. Where had she been hiding? Why was she here? No, never mind, why was she dressed like that? Marika made a pleased noise behind him. My, 'tis rare that I can fool thee twice in one evening. Haste thou been slacking. Naruto choked. She'd set this up somehow, concealed Rena from him until the last instant. Wasn't hard to imagine why. Marika was having none of their silence. Don't just stand there, girl. Come in. Naruto made a strangled sound. 'Tis just one night, beloved. Chidi his arm. What's the harm, besides the fact that the kids'll be confused? Methinks thou doth protest too much. And you not enough. Make not that face. She kissed his neck, drawing a shiver from him. Rena took the chance to climb into their bed. I nearly dragged Renale into this, but alas, she remains ever loyal to Raidegen. A shame, I would have liked to hear her scream. His throat went dry. No, not thinking about that. There were certain lines a man didn't cross. Rena wants a child, dear. Marika barreled on, startling him. Does the thought not entice you? Why are you being so stubborn about this? Because nothing else will get through to you. Our children are nearly of an age, beloved. She moved to embrace him from behind, preventing him from grabbing at her. Soon they will move on, out into the great wild world. Her lips planted another kiss to his cheek. When that time comes, we will be alone again. I am not yet ready for that. I will go to any lengths to avoid it. His eyes snapped to her stomach. Are you? Nay. She smiled. I am not. Naruto heaved a sigh. You're gonna give me a heart attack at this rate. ... Yet. He flung up his arms. Marika, Naruto. She sang back. You shall get both of us with child here, tonight. You have no say in the matter. His eyes flitted to the door. I could walk. Marika called his bluff in an instant. If thou truly felt that way, he would have left the moment Rena entered the room. Rena silently settled down into his lap. He tried to ignore just how good that felt. You're really set on this. I am. But first, she snapped her fingers and quite suddenly Rena found herself trapped beneath them, hands bound above her to the headboard by golden bands. The Snow Witch made a baffled noise. What is the meaning of this? This is not what we agreed upon. No, I believe it is. Marika leaned in, eyes half-lidded with delight. Remember what I promised you. A predatory smile tugged at her lips, hunger threading its way into her voice. I said I would break you. I can think of no better time than this. A finger stripped away her gown, running over the witch's pale, bare breast. You wish for a child. This is my price. Is it not a fair one? Rena growled at the queen. You will not find me so easily cowed in this. Marika grinned. I am well aware. That's what makes it so fun. She descended upon her. Mornings in Landell were something of a sedate affair these days. Why wouldn't they be? The lands between were at peace, as they had been for the last 5 years. Many had been brought peacefully into the fold of the Golden Order, and while they had their detractors, as any empire did, none had risen against them. Life was good. Life was simple. Relaxing, even. But no one could sleep forever. Not even a former shinobi turned god. Naruto creaked an eye open as the first rays of S. Marika lay nestled against him, clutching a pillow. At least he assumed it was a pillow. Probably not important. What was important was his current state of being. He was content and warm, the love of his life was spooned up against him beneath the sheets, and there was no reason to get up early today. No delegations to deal with, no treaties to make, no pacts to forge, nor enemies to fight. For once, things were quiet. Tucking his arms around her, he let himself drift off. The door slammed open, striking the wall hard enough to crack it. And with it came a singular cry. Papa! His eyes snapped open an instant too late. In the nest a small body landed squarely on his stomach and blasted the breath from his lungs. He heard Kurama wee somewhere inside him. That damn brat. Marika hummed where she lay, quietly smiling as she clutched her pillow. Your daughter is awake. Naruto hid a growl behind his hand and the scowl with it. I noticed. Papa. Tiny hands tugged at him, and his treacherous heart skipped a beat. Even after all this time, that word was his one true blue weakness. Are you all right? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hit you like that, honest. And speaking of blue, little Reina was a darling girl, the spitting image blend of her mother, Rena. Her skin a pale blue, her hair a cloud of curly azure threaded with azure, and her eyes just as bright, whiskered cheeks even now dimpling in genuine concerned delight. She'd inherited her mother's forearms too, and she used those to cling on tight to him like a little spider monkey. A very upset little monkey, judging by the noises she was making. I'm fine, he rasped and reached around to pat her head. You just startled me. Her eyes watered. Then, you're all right. A nod. In that case, mistakes were made. ... The sun's up. Up, up, up. She bounced on his chest with every word, much to his agony and Marika's amusement. Time to train. You promised. He groaned. Had he really forgotten about that? He already knew the answer. I said we would, but why so early? Another thought occurred to him. And where's your sister? Did you leave her alone again? No. Reina pointed. She's right there. As luck would have it, the pillow in Marika's arms wasn't a pillow at all. Something squirmed in her grasp. No, not something, someone. A familiar head of bright hair poked up between him and Marika, bleary eyes blinking up at them. In another life, another world, one of those eyes would have been sealed. Now, noisy. Naruto found himself quirking a brow. Melina, when did you get in here? Last night. Marika's youngest daughter yawned cutely. Nightmare. Still noisy. Going back to sleep now. Her piece said. She snuggled back down against her mother with a contented sigh and said no more. Sneaky girl. She'd taken to her shinobi training a little too well if she could sneak past him like this. In a matter of moment, she and Marika were fast asleep once more. Honestly, those two could sleep like the dead. If young Reina was the rowdy one, then Marika's daughter was quite, well, quiet for her age. She wasn't sullen or melancholy by any means, she simply didn't speak unless she felt the need. Unlike her sister. Thump. Oh, he laughed as little fists beat at his chests. What was that for? Don't ignore me, Papa. Feisty girl. Wouldn't dream of it. The wry ghost of a smile graced his face. After the events of that night, Reina and Marika could seldom stand to be in the same room as one another, but there could be no denying they'd made lovely children. Sure, Reina was a bit too energetic and Melina a touch too somber at times, but they were kids for crying out loud. If they weren't quirky, then they were up to something. Reina gave him a shake. Training. He laughed. All right, little moon. Breakfast first. They found Melina in the yard. Seeing these days her made him feel old. His little girl was growing up. Not quite a woman, not yet, but she was nearly there. She'd grown into that precious Valkyrie helm of hers at long last, and her blade with it. These days she looked downright regal in her armor. Her chosen mount only further served to exemplify that. There had been a time when she barely came up to the Black Destroyer's knee. Now she was taller than it. Almost had him wanting to tease her, it did. Getting ready to set out, are we? I am. She gave a tug at her mount's reins. Radon expects me in Caled by the end of the day. My shadow's already ridden ahead of me to prepare the way. Keen eyes spied Reina lingering at his knee and crinkled in thinly veiled mirth. Dragged him out of bed early, did you? I had wondered why you were up this early. Her younger sister beamed. Yup. Radoned him. Naruto's thumbed his chin. You two are awfully chummy these days. Anything I should know? Melina made a point of tilting her helm down to hide her eyes from him. He circled round her to get a better look. That doesn't sound like a no. I'm not a child anymore, father. You aren't. He took visceral pleasure in needling her. I seem to recall you having a crush on him when you were younger. That had her lifting her helmet to look at him. Are you giving me your blessing? Eh, why not? He couldn't help but tease her. That's not like you're related or anything. His words broke right through her composure. Decorum shattered, she rounded on him with a wail. Daddy, no. Daddy, yes. A wink went her way. Marika's after me for grandchildren. Somebody's gotta do it. She flung up her arms. You have Melina and Reina to look after. Naruto mirrored the motion. Tell that to her. Reina giggled at their feet. For some reasons he couldn't quite fathom, Marika seemed hellbent on having a large family ... be it extended or otherwise. Maybe it had something to do with her past. She wanted to surround herself with children, grandchildren, and probably great-grandchildren when it came to that. But just because he didn't understand didn't mean he wasn't averse to such a thing. More power to her, as far as he was concerned. The twins were nearly adults now, and these were their lives to live. Nor was Marika the only one eager for children. Rumor had it Renala and Radigan had a fourth on the way. Even the reclusive Godwin was pursuing a consort these days. A horn sounded from the gate. Melina blew out a sigh. ... It's time for me to be off, then. He opened his arms. Give your old man a hug. She didn't budge. Neither did he. Nearly half a minute passed before she finally walked into his arms. He squeezed her tight. She put up a token effort but gave in with a sigh. And where's your brother? He made a show of peering over her shoulder, half expecting to find Miquella there. Off training, again. She squirmed in his arms. I've not seen him since he returned from Nokron last night. He let her go with a frown. Wait, he actually went. I didn't hear about it. Rather than answer, Melina knelt and laid a hand on Reina's head. Take good care of father while I'm away, won't you? We both know he likes to get into trouble. Reina chirruped happily. I will. Boy. His youngest grinned as Melina swept herself up onto her steed. A crack of the reins and she was off, hurtling through the open gate to the golden plains beyond. Naruto saw his opportunity and took it, rounding on Reina. All right, you smug little imp. That does it. Training begins now. His youngest daughter rocketed backward with a startled squeal and landed in a bale of hay. What was that for? You weren't ready. He beckoned. Care to try again? Reina righted herself and scowled at him. Then she lunged. God, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Being an elven lord even less so, immortality had its benefits to be sure, and he wouldn't give up his family for a moment. But as of late there were often times when Naruto found he almost didn't want the power or the prestige the title offered. By contrast, it felt like everyone wanted a piece of him to the exclusion of all else. Not only was he expected to rule, but he was expected to rule well, keep the peace between the fractious peoples of the lands between as great Godfrey had, and likewise crush any enemies who dared to threaten the realm. The former he could do. The latter ... well. He'd always been more of a talker than a fighter, you know. What enemies yet remained for them to face anyway? They were in an age of peace. Family squabbles aside, there was no one and nothing left for the Golden Order to fight. Sad as it might sound, their enemies had been bested. The last giant remained confined upon the mountaintop of his kin, protecting the infernal flame from any who might seek to use it. The Albinaurics had long since been brought into the fold, while the Omens were pacified by Godwin some time ago alongside the dragons. Of the wretched Godskin apostles, none remained, having been dealt with long before he'd made his way to the lands between. Meanwhile, their alliance with the sorcerers of Rhea Lucaria had never been stronger. Renala was even now with her 5th child, having given birth to darling Rowan shortly before Melina and Reyna came into the world. She and Radagon were quite happy in the lakes. At a glance, one might say all was well. But he feared for the future. There were dark rumors stirring the south, whispers of corrupted creatures near Caelid. That was the very reason Melina was headed there, to be their liaison with Radon to figure out what in blazes was going on. And if she favored her cousin ... well, he found that entertaining Melina and Miquella were strong, their skills honed to a razor's edge. He and Marika had seen to that personally. But their girls ... oh, their girls. They weren't ready. Where was the love of the fight, the thrill of the hunt, the rush of the chase? Case in point, Naruto raised his right hand. Come on, then. Melina struggled to her feet, dusted down her gown and then blinked up at him, little face writ in a frown. You want me to hit you? His smile didn't waver, even as his words echoed out across the empty courtyard. I want you to try. Her frown became a scowl. That sounds like an awful lot of effort. Why should I? Because it was your sister's turn yesterday. He'd thrashed Reyna until she could barely move, yet even so she'd managed to cut him all the same. That was a passing grade. You're just as strong as she is. Melina huffed and muttered something less than pleasant under her breath. A blonde brow rose. Doubting yourself again? No, she shook her head. There's no doubt at all. She raised her arms in a shrug. I know that I cannot hit you, therefore it would be foolish to try. My energy would best be spent elsewhere. Ah, his lazy little girl. No, not lazy, he corrected himself, laconic. She simply didn't see the point in what she saw as a useless effort. Time to tug that out of her, kicking and screaming if need be. You won't get anywhere with an attitude like that. She shook her head. Father, this is pointless. No, he wagged a finger he way. Pointless is giving up before you even try. Your mother taught you better than that. I certainly did. Melina sighed explosively. May I at least procure Reyna's help? Kurama chuckled before he could. They both knew the answer. You know, ordinarily I'd say yes, but... A deafening explosion rattled the earth on the other side of the capital, punctuated by a rush of hot wind and a rising plume of black smoke besides. She's busy with your mother and hers. Vivid blue spellfire flashed through the air to scorch the clouds. Would you care to interrupt? Melina shook her head fiercely, setting her hair a-swaying like a fiery curtain. Didn't think so. Naruto cracked his neck and stalked towards her. You have 3 seconds to reach me before I reach you. Melina sighed explosively and vanished before his very eyes. Quite the neat trick, that. One moment she existed in the physical plane and the next, she simply didn't. He still didn't know who taught her that spell, be it her mother, Reyna, or if she'd simply come up with it on her own. Regardless, the results spoke for themselves. Silence reigned supreme over the courtyard, stretching on into eternity. Kurama sighed into it. You're not going to move, are you? The ghost of a smile graced his face. Nope, not a sound was made. He could have done any number of things. Instead he chose to wait. He'd promised her 3 seconds. No more, no less. 1, 2... and now, 3. Naruto turned his head a fraction of an inch to the right. There you are. He sensed his sullen daughter a heartbeat before she struck. Melina reappeared behind him in midair, wreathed in a shroud of azure, poised to strike at his exposed flank. Time slowed to a crawl. He saw every second, every moment, her face writ in concentration, dagger poised to stab into the back of his neck. Good form and impeccable poise to be sure, but her speed left much to be desired. He didn't even deign to bat the blade down. Instead he ducked, whirled with a grin, and kicked her in the chest. She went flying across the yard, hair lofting around her head in a tiny halo. Then she was gone, hurtling across the yard in a thunderbolt of motion. A stray strand of blonde hair fluttered through the air in her wake. Impressive. He caught it between his fingers. Most impressive. You almost got me that time. Almost isn't enough. She granted him a small, severe scowl. She really did remind him of a younger Marika when she pouted like that. Can't you go easy on me? I'm going easy on you. A quick flicker forward and he was upon her before she could react. He caught her by the wrist, reached over her little head and got a hold of her hood. From there he hoisted her up and dangled her before him as one might a naughty kitten. He gave her a light shake in the air for good measure. What did you do wrong? She shrugged helplessly in his grasp, crossed her arms and refused to look at him. Such a grouchy little girl. He smiled for her and gave the answer he knew she needed. You gave your intent away. Her brow furrowed in confusion. How do I mask that? Would you like to learn? Melina's head bobbed once, in a quick nod, an equally rare sign of actual emotion from his otherwise stoic daughter. All right, then. He sat down and patted the space beside him only to laugh now when she plonked herself down on his knee instead. For starters, it's a matter of control. A hand descended upon her head to muss her hair, drawing a fearsome pout from his child. In battle, you can't give your intentions away, be it hollering before you attack, or even allowing others to sense you. A startled shriek echoed above them. Someone catch me. Like so. Naruto chuckled once, reached up, and snatched little Reyna out the sky before she could reach terminal velocity, casually correcting his wayward child's fatal plunge to pull her into his lap. All this without looking up. Eyes wide and hair frazzled, blue skin flushed with glee, Melina's sister clung to his left arm for dear life and latched on tight with all 4 of her arms. 2 guesses where she came from. First 2 didn't count. Really, those 2 didn't know the meaning of restraint. Hello, little moonbeam. He patted her head with his free arm. Having fun, are we? Sure enough, Reina's little blue face lit up in a wild grin. Mother threw me. A blonde brow rose in mild bemusement. Which one? Marika alighted in a pointed crouch behind them. Suppose that answers my questions. By contrast, the Lady Rena's descent proved far more sedate. She didn't so much fall out of the sky as she did glide, landing lightly beside the queen. A cross look was returned with a bemused smile on Marika's part, to which she huffed and she sauntered toward the 3 of them with intent. She caught Reina's chin with one hand, pinching her cheek as only a mother could. I warned you not to provoke her, child. Reina stuck out her tongue. I didn't think she'd throw me that far, nor did I expect you to enjoy it so much. Thou certainly do no lack for courage. Marika nudged Reina aside, patted the girl's head in passing, then sat beside them on Melina's side for good measure. Naruto blew out a sigh as his daughter gave a happy cheer-up and laid her head to rest on his shoulder. It was too much to hope that wouldn't provoke Reina, which it did, of course. Sure enough, she claimed Reina's side. Her hip brushed his, 2 of her arms wrapping around their daughter, while the remainder circled low around his waist. If she thought to provoke Marika, she was sorely disappointed. The queen only smirked. Why, look at us. Aren't we a happy family? Reina hissed. Thou art no sister of mine, accursed witch. No. Long lashes fluttered in a sinister blink. Then why do I recall you screaming my name? Ugh. Naruto butted his between them before they could say something that might scar the girls. Not the time or place. Fair. Reina relented with a growl. How goes their training then? She lifted her chin. My daughter has already mastered her first set of spells. Marika preened. Melina has much to learn, but plenty of time in which to learn it. Hey, how did the 3 of you meet? Naruto bit his lip to stifle a hearty guffaw. Leave it to Reina to miss the tension and blast right through it. Bless her sweet, simple soul. For once, both women winced. Reina found her voice first. That's ... 'Tis not a tale for younger ears, my daughter. All right, the little imp allowed with a displeased noise, but then who's stronger? Melina tilted her head, not quite comprehending. Stronger. Well, she said with all the logic of a child, someone has to be. There it was, the gauntlet thrown down. Naruto would have palmed his face if his arms weren't held captive. As things stood, he could only sigh. Melina took the words to heart, just as he knew she would. Mother is stronger, of course. Child. Reina tutted and bopped her nose. I would destroy the queen in a fair fight. Marika's smile was positively lascivious. On that, I beat thee handily. The witch turned absolutely scarlet. I said in a fair fight. Naruto winced. Let's not be hasty. Melina damned him. I would like to see such. Father is stronger than both of thee. Naruto shrugged thoughtlessly. Well, they're not wrong on that account. The stakes were made. Marika and Reina fixed him with a dark glower. Oh, bold words. Reina clapped with 2 of her hands, using the remaining duo to stifle a giggle. Fight. It has been some time since we truly clashed. Naruto heaved another sigh. Surely Melina and Miquella were having any easier time of things. If the twins weren't, he'd eat his bloody boot and tear his hair out besides. They were waiting for her. In truth, Melina had seen this ambush coming for some time now. From the moment she left the capital, she'd been aware of the eyes upon her. Likewise, she'd noticed riders in the distance as she journeyed south. At first, they only ever remained that distant, close enough to see the distant plum of dust, yet too far for her to discern their identities. A foreign, nebulous threat, one she hadn't paid much heed to. She was no stranger to the common folk, nor was she to those who wished to see her. She wanted to believe this was such, and so she put it out of her mind. Until today, she'd awoken this morning and found no sign of her pursuers on the road as she and her entourage departed, which meant one of 2 things. Either they'd given up the chase or, more likely, they'd taken advantage of her respite and rode ahead the better to prepare a trap or some other fell trick. The likelihood of them being supplicants or admirers dwindled with each passing hour. In truth, Melina hoped they weren't allies. She'd grown restless back in the capital, adrift, with lack of purpose. If combat was to be had today, then she was rather looking forward to it, a chance to truly test her skills in an uncontrolled environment. Not but her own wit and skill, the thrill. My lady. Melina reined herself and her steed, in with a restless sigh. She did not begrudge Finlay and young Thrud their concern. They were her Scarlet Valkyries, her guards, part of an elite company of 12 handpicked by her and her alone. Today they numbered but 2. She hadn't seen or felt the need to bring the rest for so meager a meeting with Radon. No need to bring the entire order with her for something like this ... or so she'd thought at the time. Now she found herself wondering if she should have. Though full helmets hid their faces, she could feel their disquiet all the same. They were nervous. Worry not. She laid a hand on her knight's shoulder. If this is a trap, then we shall be the ones to spring it. On our terms. Finally perked up and saluted. Yes, my lady. They found the first roadblock ahead, a series of ramshackle long logs bound together across the road. Pitiful. She could leap clean over that in a single bound, if not cut clean through it. Was this truly the best they could bring themselves to muster? Even mere brigands should know better, yet this coordination smacked of a higher power. A plan, a scheme. She confessed herself curious as to what it might be. Sure enough, she found them ahead. 10 in all. Tite were a strangely motley crew, all things considered, and a grim one at that. Some of them didn't look right. Their armor had seen better days, to say nothing of their blades. Some were twisted and misshapen much like their bodies, and the smell, oh gods, the smell ... What was that? A sickly sweet stench arose from them, a foul odor that made her eyes water and her throat close. They'd hemmed them in, bold ... and stupid. Melania swept of her horse with a sigh. Honestly, they'd never learn. You there? One of the soldiers, a woman judging by the tenor of her voice, barked at them. You enter the domain of Our Lady. Supplicate yourself at once. ... Heed my words. She drew herself upright with a sigh, uncaring of their ravings. I am Melania, blade of Miquella, and I have never known defeat. Her sword escaped its sheath with a naked rasp of steel. I came to Kaled in good faith to treat with my cousin, but I will not allow you to pursue this madness of yours. Ignore her. The largest of them brayed. Stupid brats alone and with only 2 guards. This is our chance. For our new lady. Her interest piqued. And what lord might that be? For Our Lady of Rot. The man removed his helm and glimpsed the twisting pustules in his face, gross, covering his eyes so much so as to render him blind. She demands your supplication. His lips split in a grin, revealing ugly broken yellow teeth. So shall it be. You shall serve her. All shall serve. She bridled. I serve no one but my family. You will serve. The madman brayed. Take her. Take the girl. Melania closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Released it now. Enough. Finlay and Thrud stepped back. Wise of them, for in that instant Melania leaped upward and the man's words died an ugly death. She hung there for a moment, blade in hand, defying gravity itself. Her attackers looked on aghast, more so when they realized there was suddenly more than one of her, 2 perfect copies rising from the smoke, flanking them in a perfect triangle. The demigoddess granted them a thin smile, golden eyes flashing beneath her golden Valkyrie helm. Her would-be kidnappers hesitated. More fools they. In a heartbeat she was upon them. Triple waterfowl dance. Was it really? Naruto suspected it was a matter of perspective. For all his vaunted talk of peace, he knew his body was made for war. There could be no denying it. He had strength that could bring the very gods to heel, annihilate armies, crush continents if he so chose. He'd only grown stronger since he came to the lands between. Did he want such strength? No, but that didn't change the facts or what he was. Marika was much the same in that regard. She had great strength of her own, power that, if left unchecked, could bring ruin to those around her. Yet rather than wage war they used their talents to keep things in check. Preserve the status quo, as it were. Peace was all well and good, but at the end of the day, peace didn't get the blood pumping. Songs weren't sung of peace, no matter how pretty it was. Their skill sets were best tooled toward war, and while they could talk their way out of a fight, the ugly truth remained. They were growing bored. Not with each other, of course, or their children never, but the state of the world as a whole. And boredom bred ... Well, Naruto wasn't entirely sure what per se, but he knew he didn't care for the current state of things. It felt like the world was moving on without the 2 of them, and while he was quite happy to entrust its safety to future generations, he was also concerned for them. Miquella and Melania, at least, were above reproach. He taught them well, the same values he was even now working to instill in Melina and Reina. Radon and Radagon could be trusted to do the right thing at the very least, as could Renala, but beyond them friends were few and far between. While he saw Morgoth just about every day now, Moog and Godwin had been quiet as of late. Too quiet. Rykard as well, coupled with the odd rumors he'd heard as of late and the stirrings in the north. This was the calm before the storm, and make no mistake, the storm was coming. He knew it, felt it in his tired bones. Best they prepared themselves while they could. Which brought him to the present moment, or rather the curious sight before him. Big brother Morgoth, there you are. Let's play a game. Play, play, play. Careful, princess, do not tug on my horns overmuch lest you owe. Why is your tail so terribly long? Were you born with it? Melina, dear girl, please get down from there at once. I think not. I am quite comfortable here. Naruto clapped a hand to his mouth to muffle his laughter as he rounded the bend. It seemed little Reina and Melina had tracked down Morgoth again, much to his amusement. Despite all his complaints, the old omen looked utterly at peace where he sat in the garden, uncaring as the children dangled off him like some kind of mad jungle gym. Reina swung from one of his many horns while Melina dangled atop his tail. He appeared relaxed, yet one had but to see his eyes to realize he was in a state of constant readiness. Though one hand rested against his gnarled cane, the other lay open upon his knee, ready to save his half-siblings at any given moment. It was a good look for him. A shame he had to sour it with his questions. Have you seen Moog around? Greetings to you as well, father. The grace-given omen made to shake his head, thought better when he remembered Reina. I thought I told you to stop calling me that. I cannot. This time Morgoth did shake his head, accidentally dislodging Reina. She tumbled down in his lap with a happy yelp, bounced up, and leaped onto his back again, paying them no heed. My sword is yours, as always. You raised me out of that pit and reunited me with my family. With mother. My loyalty was yours from that day, as it shall be until my last day. Told you. Kurama chortled softly in the back of his head. His allegiance is beyond question. Well, thanks in any case. His shoulders heaved in a sigh. Don't suppose you know where I can find Godwin? Morgoth perked up a touch. I believe he is currently in Stormvale, tending to his descendants. Naruto's jaw clicked open. He snapped it shut. Since when does he have? Surprising, is it not? The aging omen chuckled hoarsely. Time does not stand still, even for our kind. When last we spoke he told me he'd taken an interest in one of them. Young Godric, I believe the boy's name was. He is nearly of an age with young Reina and Melina. Perhaps they could visit him sometime. The lad could use a friend, a new cousin. Reina cooed appreciatively. Yes, please. Melina tilted her head, quietly intrigued. Nor did he miss the naked hope in Morgoth's voice. In his heart of hearts, he wanted them all to get along. No, he genuinely believed they could. It was a simple hope. Pure, even. He hoped it would come true. He had no desire to see everyone tear one another apart over a senseless misunderstanding. There is another matter. Oh? He blinked, drawn from his reverie by Morgoth's words. I am to marry. Such a humble admission, and yet it floored him all the same. He bowed his head a little, scratching at an ashen cheek. I would appreciate it if you and Mother could be present for the ceremony. Naruto felt his brow shoot up into his hair. Eh? Morgoth? In love? With whom? He'd never shown interest in that sort of thing before. The girls ceased their swinging atop their brother, silent for once, and utterly fixated upon him. Morgoth must have noticed it too, because he wrung his hands, hastened to explain himself. She is a skilled fighter, he said. Warrior blood truly runs through her veins. Never mind that. Names, man. Naruto grabbed him by the cloak and gave him a shake. I need names. How did you meet? I cannot give hers, not yet. Morgoth lowered his horned head, hiding the ghost of a smile in the shade. As to the day we encountered one another, I shall tell all when you meet her. She is quite charming, with a heart of gold to match. I believe the two of you would get along swimmingly. Now he understood. Which is why you're telling me this first, and not Marika. Mother would overreact. Naruto opened his mouth, closed it. Now, Marika would be over the moon, which meant she'd likely drag Renala into this. Both would want to make a grand ceremony of everything. After all, it wasn't every day a demigod was to be wed. Doubtless it would be a day to remember. Fair. He relented with a sigh. Want me to break the news to her? Another nod. I would appreciate that, yes. When can we meet her? Soon. We wish to be wed by year's end. HMM. He hummed his agreement and began counting off on his fingers. That's, 6 months from now. Indeed. Morgoth stood carefully, as Melina was still sitting atop his tail, and Reina his back to sketch a deep bow. Once again I give you my utmost thanks. You did more than save me that day. You changed my life. You saved me, showed me what it was not just to love others, but myself as well. I shan't forget this. Heat rose to his cheeks. All right. You're making me blush. Morgoth barreled on. My beloved, and I even considered naming our first child after you. Naruto's brain fizzled. It took a full 3 seconds of silence before he could think again. He immediately sputtered. No. Bad idea. As you wish. Morgoth capitulated all too easily. Is there anything else you wish to know? Did anyone else get eloped when I wasn't looking? Rykard has taken a consort, if you wish to know. Naruto slapped his forehead. Of course he has. What's next? Radon fathering a gaggle of girls. Did Ranny adopt an orphanage when I wasn't looking? No, none of that. Not at all. Morgoth laughed a little at that, much to his chagrin. But it's only natural for gods to seek happiness, much as mortals do. Is that so wrong? Naruto flinched. Though he doubtlessly didn't mean it as such, Morgoth's statement only served to hammer home his own insecurities. Their world was changing. Their children, moving on. He and Marika slowly but surely being left behind. It brought back unpleasant questions, left his mind dwelling on them all the more. If there was truly peace in the land between for the time being, then what was he to do? What could he do? Rule, obviously, but that was his duty these days, not his joy. He ruled with Marika because he had to, because he loved her, yes, but also because there was no one better suited to the task. No, that wasn't the right question. What did he want to do? What would make him happy? What would bring him joy? He racked his brain for an answer and found none. Unbidden, he recalled something Marika had once said to him, shortly after their precious twins were born. An answer came to him, then. He seized it. Mind if I leave the girls with you for the rest of the day? Morgoth shrugged. I've no plans. Might I ask why? Naruto grinned. Something I want to do. Peace is boring, isn't it? We were made for war, Naruto. You and I deny it all you like. You think yourself so clever, but you deny your true nature. You are a ruler, yes. A father, too. But what you truly are is. Naruto eased the door open. It was very impressive as doors went, forged of finest oak and squeaky hinges all, which made his feat of slipping in without so much as a sound all the more impressive. A subtle nudge closed it behind him just as quickly, and on a whim he deigned to leave it unlocked. Probably for the best. He'd be needing it in a second. Quick footsteps carried him forward. He found Marika sprawled out in her grand bed, enjoying a leisurely afternoon nap. She didn't wake as he approached. As expected, she was a sound sleeper. More fool she. He plucked a scroll from his belt, unfurled it over her head now. A moment passed. Another now, just to make certain she wouldn't spring awake and deck him. When she did not, he ran a chakra-clad hand over the mark within. It pulsed once, it released a thin plume of smoke and appended its contents onto the queen. Cold water splashed down. And then, Marika jolted up with a shriek, hollering at the top of her lungs. "You son of a whore. What was that for? My mother was a very nice lady, I'll have you know." Still smiling, Naruto pushed a second parcel into her trembling hands. "Hold this, would you? Might help you dry off." Marika accepted the scroll with a sputter, still blinking the water from her eyes. "Now see here you." Orange ink burst froth from the parchment to spatter her face, hair, and gown. "You do realize, credit where it was due," his lady wife did not cry out again. Not this time. She was much too proud for that. She merely reached up, wiped the worst of the pain from her scowling visage, and glared grave golden daggers at him. "You do realize, of course, that this means war. If it was a fight you wanted, you had but to ask." "I know," he planted a fist on his hip, "but now you're motivated to try and kick my ass. There shall be no trying." Marika snapped her fingers and her hammer rocketed across the room into her waiting grasp. She turned it toward him as one might a key in a lock. "I command thee, kneel." Her lips quirked in a smug smile. "Do so and perhaps I shall spare you the indignity of defeat or the pranks to follow." There she was, the fiery, feisty woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. He couldn't help but smile and egg her on. "Didn't you kneel to me last night?" Marika's pale face went red. "Irrelevant, was it?" He tapped his fin with one finger and twisted the verbal knife. "I seem to recall you saying." He knew he'd pushed his wife over the edge when she lunged at him with a yowl. Naruto met her with a merry roar all his own. Hammer met fist. Neither yielded. The entire world shook from the force of their clash, yet for them, it may as well have been a breeze. Nor did they stop there. His knee crashed into her chin and snapped her head back. Undaunted, she retaliated with a jarring headbutt, to which he grasped her wrist and wrenched her hammer free from her fingers. Naturally, that only emboldened her. Her heel crashed into his face and cast him out her room, sending him slamming down the stairs and into the city. Rather than reclaim her hammer and wield it like any sane goddess would, Marika leaped down after him, hands free. "Get over here." Naruto surged up just in time to meet her, and well he did, because she went for his throat. He caught her hands at the last instant and grasped them over his head, and she is. They clasped fingers together, tensed their bodies and planted their feet, straining against one another. The ground trembled beneath them. A fracture formed in the earth. A crack, no. Larger it grew, then larger still, founding a fissure underfoot. The entire capital began to rumble around them. Neither cared. Marika's grin matched his own as they warred against one another. "T would seem you've grown stronger since last we clashed." "Right back at you." Naruto felt his own grin grow. "Show me how much you've improved after all this time." "Happily, dear consort of mine." They broke their clash and collided in a storm of blows and laughter, wreaking havoc as they fell upon one another. Leyndell would later christen it as the Day of Laughter. From it a rather strange festival would spawn, one in which every citizens of the lands between would both gather for combat and endeavor to play practical jokes upon one another, the greatest of which would earn an audience with the Lord and Lady of Leyndell themselves. Peace might be boorishly boring to some, a blissful blessing to others. Yet one immutable truth remains. Pranks were eternal. Miquella sighed. It was a long-suffering, drawn-out breath, born of exasperation. Days like these reminded him that he was truly the only sane one left in the family. He'd expected many things when he returned to the capital today. The festival was not one of them. As far as surprises went, he found this a most pleasant one. Like always, the people welcomed him back with open arms. He was their prince, their chosen, son of Naruto and Marika, blessed be their names, so on and so forth. Why the people were celebrating, he cared not, only that they were. Mortal lives were terribly short after all, they should seek happiness wherever they could find it. One such passerby told him today's celebration had something to do with the king and queen. That was his first warning, but after his long journey, he dismissed it out of hand. Surely nothing ill could come from this festival, surely all was well, and surely those were bells he heard ringing near the Erd-tree, not the sounds of combat. Surely his parents weren't that brash to start brawling in broad daylight. Right, and so up he went, ascending into the capital. The higher he climbed, the louder the noise grew. He began to hear laughter. The servants and priests he passed bowed their heads and muttered 1,000 pardons, none willing to meet his gaze. He didn't miss their rueful smiles, nor their red faces. This close, he could clearly hear the sounds of combat. They couldn't be mistaken for anything else. His parents were indeed fighting, and by the sound of it, fighting hard. Shockwaves rattled his teeth with every step. No servants dared come this close. And why was there paint strewn everywhere? Orange, black, gold, even blue in places. It looked like a painter had gone mad. He found yet more chaos as he ascended, torn sheets and clothes, battle scars etched into the ground, the pungent smell of rotten eggs, but curiously no blood. And still the laughter from high above had yet to cease. He had an inkling of what was going on up there by the Erd-tree, but he prayed he was mistaken. There were things he needed to discuss with his parents, important matters of state, revelations concerned the lands between as a whole. Neither would be willing to speak to him if they were in one of their moods. By some miracle of happenstance, made it to mother's bedchambers in relative peace before someone finally jumped him. Miquella, enemy. He had all of an instant to tense, then Reina landed on his back. Even then it took him a moment to relax and he had to forcefully tear his hands away from the hilts of his daggers. A wry smile touched the corner of his mouth. He willed himself to breathe. Inhale, exhale, in, out, no attacker, this was his kin. And if she was here, then her sister wouldn't be far behind. Hello, little one. He looked to the little blue bundle clinging to his back. To what do I owe the pleasure? She grinned at him. Can you take us to Stormvale? His brain fizzled spectacularly. Why ever would I do that? A tiny hand tugged at his sleeve. Speak of Melina and she shall appear. We wish to make a friend. We'll see what your parents have to say. Both girls exchanged an exasperated glance between themselves. They won't say anything. The younger of the two whined. They're busy. We snuck away from Uncle Morgoth and they still haven't stopped. Oh dear. Miquella arched a blonde brow. Stopped what? A mighty clash rattled the ground underfoot. ... Very well, let us visit them. Melina reached for his hand wordlessly. Miquella sighed, took it, and guided the little princess after him, leaving Reina clinging to his back with all four of her arms. Good girls, pure girls. He'd happily give his life to protect them, but sometimes they were just so spoiled. When they reached the Golden Bough, Miquella's hopes were dashed. Truly, he was the only sane one of this family. He'd thought so once before as a child, and he certainly thought so now. It was worth repeating. Hold still and die like a man, husband. You'll never take me alive. I don't intend to. For the Lord and Lady of Lanedale were at it again, but this time couldn't tell if they were flirting or fighting. Mother's hammer was a blur of mottled gray and gold, seeking not his head but his groin with ruthless dispatch. Each time Father blocked with a bare hand and retaliated with body shots of his own, hammering her ribs, torso, and on occasion, even her breasts, which only made her all the angrier, and round it went in a seemingly endless cycle. Payback was a beach, as commoners like to say. Yet for all their viciousness his parents were laughing as they fought. Back and forth they ranged beneath the Erd tree, flinging chakra and spells at one another like two children with buckets of paint. Nor did they stop there. Father crossed his arms to defend, only for her spell to spatter across his arms and face, dyeing most of his cest gold. Marika seek at a hip and planted her free fist upon it. "'Tis a good look for you, no." Naruto's right eye began to twitch. "This means war. I thought it was already a war. And with war comes conquest." She put two fingers to her lips and licked them. "To the victor goes the spoils." Reina and Melina gagged. "Uowa." Miquella felt his face burn red. Mother was many things. Shameless was undoubtedly one of them. She often did what she pleased, when she pleased, to whom she pleased. Today was no different than the rest. Her blood was well and truly up now. There'd be no reasoning with her when she was like this. The orange paint stains on her dress likely had something to do with it. Case in point, the moment Father looked their way, she clocked him with her hammer. There was a low blow. First come first served, husband of mine. She sashayed away, hips swaying as he rubbed his jaw. "You can't touch me." "All right." Naruto inhaled slowly, deeply, angrily. "Parry this, you filthy casual." Marika looked over her shoulder, baffled. "Parry Mother's girlish yelp was the sweetest music to all their ears. Little Melina and Reina cheered as Naruto clotheslined their mother, grabbed her by the hips, and planted her in the ground head first like a turnip. He didn't stop there. The queen was still trapped in the dirt when Father stepped forward, yanked her black gown down over her still twitching legs as she lay there, and gave her arse a solid smack. At least she had the decency to wear proper undergarments this time. Almost immediately, the ground began to crack. Miquella wisely stepped back, herding Reina and Melina with him. And well that he did, because their mother all but burst from the stone, howling bloody murder. "Vengeance shall be mine." Father hummed. "Promises, promises." She absolutely twitched. Her hammer sang with golden light. Mother certainly seemed to mean it this time, judging by the speed with which she struck. An overhand smash barreled down into Father's guard. Once again she was parried, less so the second harsh slap against her rear. Marika jolted, concentration shattered, then he was past her, leaving her to stumble away. "There you are." Miquella flinched as he found himself the subject of that gimlet stare. "I was wondering where you'd gotten off. Finally decided to come, have you?" Marika swiped at him as he spoke, to which he ducked lazily, never breaking eye contact for a moment. "What's wrong? Not gonna come over here and give your old man a hug?" Marika rounded on him. "Why, you little, don't ignore me." "Honey, that's enough." Father, at least, had the wherewithal to realize they had an audience. "Put the hammer down. The kids are watching." Mother growled. "Never. We're not done." Naruto's glower redoubled. "I mean it. Hammer down." Her eyes danced with sudden mischief. ... As you wish. ... Hold this, wouldst thou? Hold where? Naruto yelped as she dropped her hammer on his toe and jumped him, tackling him to the ground. "No fair." She dove on him and smashed her lips to his. "All's fair in love and war, husband of mine. Now off with thy clothes." Reina tilted her head. "Are they fighting now, or fing?" Miquella gasped. "Reina, who taught you such language?" "Mama did." Miquella sighed, clamped a hand over each of their eyes and let them away, talking loudly to drown out the noises his parents were making. Just thinking of it made him retch. "Do not make eye contact. Do not make eye contact. Whatever you do, do not make eye contact. Come along, little ones. You wanted to seek Stormvale, yes. That sounds like a grand idea. Come along, now." There'd be no reasoning with Mother and Father until the dawn. His news could wait until tomorrow, he supposed. The things we do for family. The dawn came. "You look tired, cousin." Melina was tired, far more than she cared to admit. She was bone-dead, dirt-tired after her journey and wanted nothing more than to fling herself into the first bath she could find and scrub this filth off her. Both the dirt as much as the blood. She resisted the urge to huff and refused to let it show as she slung herself forth from her horse. Her guards had little luck in that regard, if only because they looked even worse than she felt. Poor Finlay had taken a grievous wound to her left shoulder, and she suspected that even with healing, she'd never quite regain full motion from it again. Then there had been the dragon, from whom they had to flee rather than fight due to her night's injuries. Melania found herself beginning to hate Kaled. The sooner she concluded her business the better, the sooner she could return home and be with her family once more. She shouldn't be angry, she knew. It was hardly Radon's fault she had encountered so many difficulties on her journey, least of all the lunatics who'd tried to kidnap her. It had been a hard ride even after the fact, and they'd had to push the horses to their breaking point merely to make up for lost time. In any case, she was here now. Nothing else mattered at the moment. Indeed, I am. She cursed herself for the yawn that followed. How fare you? Better than you, I'd say. Radon looked healthy as ever, the very picture of it, really, broad arms crossed before his chest. He slung one forth to help catch her as she stumbled. Come, let's get you cleaned up. I believe Rani is around here somewhere, and if memory serves, she brought some healing drafts with her. Melania tensed. That blasted witch. She's here. We all are. Radon tossed the words over his shoulder as they walked. All three of us. It took some time to convince Reichard to attend. He arrived just last night. There are things we must discuss. Melania felt her brow furrow in mild consternation. Things? What manner of things? What was so urgent that I had to ride for Kaled so quickly? Here at last, Radon finally lost his grand, jovial smile. That alone worried her more than words. The future ... and the traitors within our ranks. What is this folly? 'Tis no folly at all, Rani retorted. There is a traitor amongst us. Melania slammed a fist down on the table. Goblets jumped at the sudden assault, wine sloshing treacherously within their guild depths. It took all that she had, every fiber of her being, not to leap over it and throttle those on the other side. It was tempting. So very tempting. They had insulted her honor, her core principles, all that she stood for, and done so with that same insufferable smile. It was maddening, no, it maddened her, utterly to no end. Here they sat arrayed around a large circular table, her, Radon, Reichard, and of course, Rani. It was the latter who incensed her so. You speak of betrayal, she forced the words out through grit teeth, yet give me no names. Is this a game to you? Peace, cousin. Radon raised a large hand to stymie her. I'm sure Rani didn't mean to incense you so. She most certainly did. But we are allies here, all of us. He remained the very picture of calm. There is no need to shout. Melania wrestled down her temper and willed herself to be calm. Her right arm itched. She scratched at it restlessly. Infernal thing. What was the point of this meeting? She'd never been the patient sort, not for this sort of thing. That was Miquela's forte. He was the smart one, the schemer, the strategist. She just wanted to protect those she held dear and annihilate any who dared harm them. She found Radon to be quite tolerable in that regard, if only because he shared her mindset. Reichard somewhat less so, but Rani. The two of them would never see eye to eye, even on the most trivial matters. They hadn't as children, and they wouldn't now. Rani looked fit to hold her tongue, but under her brother's gaze, however, the lunar princess finally relented. Godwin has been acting most strange of late, to say nothing of Moog. Melania shivered a little. Moog. That, at least, made sense. To this day she couldn't discern the omen's motives, whether he was ing after Miquela or father. Neither was appealing. Moog had a penchant for depraved rituals involving copious amounts of blood and other devices. She didn't want him near her family. Indeed, it was for his very nature that he had been kept at arm's length this entire time, despite being a true-blooded son of Marika. She could see why he might be plotting. Godwin ... she didn't know. They'd never interacted over much in the past. Few times he'd seemed ... sad, if somewhat insular and reclusive. What little she knew of Marika's firstborn, and there was precious little indeed, came mostly from second-hand knowledge. Rumor had it he never went anywhere with his consort, Fia, nor Fortisax, his dearest friend. She'd thought that his nature, to surround himself with those he held dear, to keep his friends close, and his enemies at arm's length, always. She'd seen him and father argue once. Voices had been raised, but she'd been too young to understand at the time. Now she found herself wondering if she should have. We did not ask you here for nothing. Reichard spoke at last. We had thought you might have some insight on their behavior, if not their movements. She balked. Why me? That serpentine gaze never left hers. You frequent the capital often. We do not. And you are honest. Radon smiled. I have never known you to tell a lie, cousin. Melania felt her face burn. Oh, gods, was it getting hot in here? Why did she feel so warm? And what would you have me do? She flung up an arm, resisting the urge to scratch it again. Why was it so damnably itchy? And conceal her embarrassment in one fell swoop. Slap them on the wrist. You know they won't listen to me. Or perhaps I should throw them in the tree, see what it thinks of them, Radon rumbled a laugh. Rani rolled her eyes. Reichard did none of these things. Careful, he hissed, to speak such as blasphemy. Melania scoffed. You speak to me of blasphemy. I know of your interest in that god-devouring serpent. Planning to feed yourself to it, are we? Reichard sputtered. I plan to harness its power, by letting it eat you. I will survive. Rykard, Ranni heaved a sisterly sigh. You're an idiot. Abandon thy foolish notions. The younger demigod crossed both arms before his cest and sulked, eyes fixed upon the floor. I would have devoured the very gods. Any who dared threaten us. No. His sister reached across the table and swatted his hand. Bad Rykard, no more serpents for thee. Thy mind is twisted enough with contemplating such a preposterous plan. Radon met Malenia's gave over their heads and offered a rueful shrug. Putting our brother's fool notions of immortality aside, we have reason to believe that our enemies will strike soon. Why tell me this? Why not father or Miquella? Ranni tutted angrily. Must I spell it out for you, churl? Call me a churl one more time and I'll show you how much I've improved with this sword. Oh, very well. Ranni must have realized she meant it too, because her anger quelled and she subsided with a scowl. We mean to catch them in the act, you silly girl, and we cannot do that if they go to ground, which they most assuredly will the moment your father deploys his scorched earth tactics. We do not know how deep this plot runs, nor how deep the rabbit hole goes, so to speak. And then the traitors are revealed. It is my belief that Marika and Naruto will crush them. Ranni replied. She could see the logic in that, but she liked it not, no, nay, not a jot. You're taking a risk. It is a necessary one. Unless you think the king and queen are not equal to the task. Do not toy with me, Ranni. I do not. Her sister steepled her fingers and laid her chin to rest atop them. There was a time when I had thought to collude with these assassins. Rykard and Radon rounded on her. Ranni, but I am content. She cut her brothers off with a raised hand. Truly, I am. I would have cast aside mine Empyrean flesh and sought another path. Were it not for your father. Now there is no need. He serves as a check against the depredations of the greater will. He will never let the fingers lay so much as pardon the pun, lay a finger on me. The rare ghost of a smile graced the corner of her mouth. I dare say he means to rule with your mother forevermore. Radon shrugged a giant shoulder. Well, it's in the name. Rykard harumphed. The eternal king and eternal queen does have a rather nice ring to it. Quite so, my brothers. Ranni granted them a rare smile. But the fact remains, an attack is coming, and we must be prepared. Her eerie gaze swept back to Malenia, the intensity of such rooting her fellow redhead where she stood. What I am about to tell thee cannot leave this room. A fragment of destined death has been stolen. Fear, cold and icy, shot through Malenia. How? Radon told her the grim tale in his sister's stead. Malekith was set upon by a great many assassins in the night. He survived, even managed to fend the intruders off, but his blade was broken and they several made off with fragments. We have recovered all but two. Ranni has one in her possession, which she and will return to the Queen's shadow this very night. Only one remains free. Perhaps he saw the doubt in her eyes, because he looked to his little sibling. Sister, if you would. Ranni withdrew a sealed case from her sleeve and set upon the table. From there, she opened it for all to see. Malenia's mind curled inward. A terrible keening noise fled from her teeth, yet she could bring herself to tear her eyes from it. She shrank back into her chair at the sight of it. Rykard joined her, making a sign to ward off evil. Heresy. For once, she agreed with the inquisitive praetor. Wrong. This ... was wrong. Terribly, horribly wrong. She looked upon the fragment, that sliver of baleful black bearing red, and lost all hope. Its very presence seemed to suck all light from the room. This was what Mother had plucked from the Elden Ring. Destined death in its purest form. It was darkness and despair and demise, an end to all things, ashes in her mouth. Here was an enemy no blade could best, no cold words could hope to sway. There would be no rebirth if that touched you, no reincarnation, no reconstitution. Not even the void. This ... this was oblivion, the destruction of both body and soul. A weapon imbued with that could very well kill thee and their children. Could her father resist such a blade? Could Mother? They were strong, but could they defeat death itself? She didn't want to know. No more. She couldn't bear the sight of destined death any longer. It unnerved her more than any foe ever could. You mustn't touch it without the proper spells. Ranni instruction broke through the pall that had fallen over her. Even a small cut could prove lethal. One of my attendants made the mistake of carrying it with their bare hands and dropped dead straight away. She tutted softly. Poor girl. Malenia shivered anew. One slip, one mistake, one cut, and that was it. You'll be dead. I shan't touch it. She pushed herself further back in her chair, scraping it against the floor to get away. Please ... take it away. Close the box. Her voice rose in a warbling plea. I do not wish to look upon it further. Radon's hand came down on her shoulder. Ghastly thing, isn't it? It is. She found herself leaning against him, eager for the warmth and comfort his presence provided. My apologies. Here at last, Ranni granted her a pitying look. Destined death is not for the faint of heart. We have reason to suspect Godwin will take advantage of this missing fragment, or worse, that he plans to ally himself with these so-called black knives. A ritual is required to imbue weapons with destined death. Only a demigod can perform such. Her brow furrowed. Why him and not Moog? One wishes for change. Rykard shrugged his shoulder. The other does not. That fool Moog wants a dynasty and doubtlessly thinks he can get so long as he attaches himself to your family. Godwin may well wish to append the whole of it. After all, lands between cannot change so long as Naruto and Marika rule. Malenia dared a nod. Silence. To the hells with silence. She must warn her family. They must be told. Young Godric had low expectations when he first encountered his cousins. After all, he was weak, sickly, and so very pale beneath his dull green robes. What possible interest could they have in him? Perhaps that was his cynicism talking. Years of being beaten down, demeaned, treated as lesser, all of it had hardened him in a way no child should be. When you were weak as he, you had to learn to defend yourself, no matter the cost. It was simply the way of the world. Godric didn't know what to make of them at first. They were certainly odd so far as sisters went. They shared blood and a father, though not the same mother. Grandmother and grandfather were larger than life to him, and while he'd not met this Rena in quite some time, he expected some level of cynicism from the adults and vicious teasing from his fellow children. Regardless, his fears availed him naught, if only because Rena and Melina shattered his expectations immediately. "Greetings," the shorter of the two intoned. "You must be Godric." The pale boy grimaced. He knew how this went, how it had gone with everyone he'd ever met. The mocking, the denigration, the veiled insults. "I know, I'm weak." He grit his teeth, refusing to be riled. "I'm weak. Shame of Godwin. Runt of the litter. You needn't rub it in." Melina tilted her head, pale hair lofting over a blue eye. "Who cares about such a thing?" Just like that, Godric's brain fizzled out spectacularly, leaving him to balk. Huh. "There's nothing wrong with being weak." Rena agreed. "We're weak. You too. Everyone's weak when compared to father and mother." This from Melina, who seemed so much wiser than her years. "We're children, silly. We're not meant to be strong. Not meant to be strong." These were the daughters of a man-made god and a living goddess both, their blood far purer than his. How could they possibly be weak? Was he dreaming? Be this some frenzied fever haze from which he would wake? Pinching his arm did nothing to dispel the illusion and only drew funny looks from the girls. "What art thou doing?" "Pinching myself," he muttered hoarsely. Rena tilted her head as well. "Why ever would you do that?" "Because this is a dream." A broken, bitter laugh tumbled out of him as he ran a hand through his silver hair. "It's best that I wake up now, don't you think?" The sister exchanged a long, lingering look between one another. Some unspoken message passed between them. Rena tutted. "This is a problem. Wouldn't you agree, sister?" Melina nodded. "Quite so. Something must be done." "Then we are of one mind." A nod. "Indeed we are." "Shall we, then?" "We shall." They rounded on him. Godric blinked, not quite comprehending. "What? He's my friend." Rena seized his arm and drew him left. "No, he's mine." Melina clung to his arm and dragged him to the right. "I saw him first. I spoke to him first." "Nuh-uh." "Yeah, Most would have balked at being tugged to and fro like some deranged toy. Protested, at the very least. For little Godric, this was paradise. Heaven on earth. Liberation from the living hell he'd been thrust into. No one had ever deigned to touch him before, not even his own father and mother. Whereas these two did not give a flying fig for such things. They practically embraced him in their haste to get at him, all the while babbling about who was better and why he should pick one over the other. He'd never had friends before, and quite suddenly, he had two too, fighting for his attention. It touched him beyond words. Was this what it felt like to be normal? A lone tear rolled down his cheek. It felt nice. If this was a dream, he never wanted to wake up. Never. Naruto hid a smile behind his hand as he watched the scene unfold. That poor boy. He has no idea what he's getting himself into. Poor. Marika tutted softly as they watched Rena and Melina play tug-of-war with young Godric. I dare say he's going to have those two chasing after him when he's older. Give him time. If he's anything like my son, he'll have no shortage of suitors. Maybe so. It still amused him. Rena rolled her eye. Should we help him? Marika thumbed her chin. I think we should commit this moment to memory. An impish smile plucked at the corner of her mouth, promising mischief. And speaking of memory, dost thou recall the face you made last night when my consort? Heat speared up back of Naruto's neck. Rena beat him to it. Do not speak of that in public. Marika grinned. But where else would I speak of it? Shall I remind you of the time when I... Rena made angry Rena noises and rounded on her with a squawk. Just like that, the two of them went herring off again, arguing amongst themselves like two she-cats. Well, Rena did the arguing. Marika merely goaded the witch along at subtle moments, reveling in the waving of her four hands and her furious face, her every sputter, every denunciation. She really was too easy to tease. Honestly, if she didn't react that he let them go at it and held his tongue, unwilling to become a target of Marika's mischief himself. He shifted his stance a little, keenly aware of the rings in his pocket. Maybe now wasn't the best time. Something shifted in the shadows nearby behind them. With it, he felt a sudden pang of ill intent. Naruto craned his neck toward it. His senses didn't let him down even after all these years. In no time at all, he glimpsed the source. A faint figure crouched in the shadows, hidden by a concealing veil. They stiffened under his gaze. He stared at them with intent, daring them to take another step forward. When they did, he nudged Marika with an elbow. Oh, his wife to be pivoted the very moment he did. Do we have a wayward spy among us? The shadow stiffened, alarmed at having been caught out. Naruto scowled. So it would seem. Run along, whomever you are. She waved a hand at it. And tell your master, whoever they may be, that we're not in the mood. Do so and we may let you live. The air shimmered a moment more as the unseen figure dithered. Glance toward the children, now. I wouldn't. Rena's voice rose in warning. Touch them and you will die. Slowly, Marika simpered with a faux smile. Common sense dictated they would do the smart thing, the sensible thing, not the stupid. Life was often disappointing. They didn't lunge at the children. Smart. They went for him instead. Not so smart. Blue eyes rolled. For the love of. They didn't make it so much as a foot before he caught them. Rena flung 3 rings of blue their way. Her spell struck true, fastening them in place to render any such assault moot. The assassin had a moment to balk, to struggle against their restraints, then it was over. Naruto's fist found their face a heartbeat later, knocking them silly. Marika's hammer slammed into their gut, folding them in half and all but wedging them into the earth. Indeed, the outcome was never in question. Hammer down. Rena heaved a sigh. Must you exclaim such things when you attack? Yes, we must. The Eternal Queen straightened up with a sigh and flicked a bead of blood from her black dress. It befits our queenly demeanor. She dislikes showing off. A blonde brow rose. What was that, my consort? The assassin gurgled wetly at their feet. Not fair. They didn't mention a witch. Oh dear. Marika tittered. I do believe our guest is dying. Someone get that concealing veil off him. Papa. Dimly, he heard Melina and Rena calling out to them in confusion. What's going on? Why did Mama hit that man with her hammer? Was he being bad? He scratched the back of his head. Yes. And that is why you must never anger thy mother. Don't mind us, dears. Marika deeded herself over him. We're just playing a game. Rena absolutely blanched. A grown-up game. She shrugged. Sure, why not? It worked like a charm. The girls scarpered, dragging a dazed Godric round the corner with them, deeper into the fortress of Stormvale. Good. Marika pivoted the moment they were gone. We can work in peace. Now then, she crouched before their would-be attacker. Who are you and what do you want? Surely you weren't going to attack our children, were you? You'd have to be foolish indeed to do such a thing. Let's see who you are under that. Their would-be assassin slumped as she tore the invisibility talisman off him. Rena saw them first and swore softly. Oh dear, it was a man wrapped in. What was that? Was he wearing someone's skin? Naruto gagged at sight of them, this bearded man clad in ghastly white robes made of godly flesh, even now leering up at them with bloody teeth. Marika's humor dried up in an instant. A godskin. I thought I forbade you and your kind from setting foot in my city. Once, but no longer. He coughed and spat blood at her face. Your words mean nothing. A new era is nigh. What is your purpose here? I was to deliver a message. Another bloody cough. She is coming. Even now she awaits ye. At the place where it all began. Foam misted at the edge of his mouth, his gaze growing dim. You have not been forgotten. Our great gloam-eyed queen has been reborn. Marika muttered something under her breath. It sounded like a curse, but that dim gaze was no longer focused upon her. It roved past Rena, ignored her, and found him now, somehow. And you, Elden Lord, she knows of thee. The Godskin Apostle's smile stretched into a crazed grin, devoid of any sanity. Oh, yes, she knows you very well. She is most eager to meet you. She has been patient, but her patience nears its end. Go to her. Seek her out. A trembling hand clawed at him and he shied back from it despite himself. She has awoken. Reunite that which was broken. Fulfill the promise left unspoken. Marika's gaze seared into his back. Promise? What promise? He didn't remember a promise. Naruto considered healing the madman, if only to interrogate him further. But the man was quivering in his death throes now, clearly beyond all semblance of aid. Her Majesty will rise again. She shall lead us to glory. She shall save us. She shall give us a new age. The madman's eyes rolled back into his head. He coughed once, twice, now. She whispers to me, even now. I can see it. Her empire. His right hand twitched. Get back. Marika seized him by the back of his shirt and yanked, well that she did, because the Godskin's body burst into flames. Great tongues of black on white, the fire seared high into the air, immolating his corpse in an instant. They kept burning, tearing at the ground, devouring the dirt and air itself, scorching the very sky with their heat. What kind of flame was that? Don't touch it. Marika smacked his hand down when he made to smother it. That fire will burn even you. It can only be muffled by magical means. I shall attend to it. Rena stepped past, refusing to look at either of them. As she did, Naruto grabbed Marika's hand and gave her a grim look. Do I even want to ask what that was about? I could say the same of you. Don't deflect. You clearly know her. I don't. Marika pointedly looked away. I may have a sister. Naruto exhaled in a long-suffering sigh. Well, that's not ominous at all. Talk. Marika squirmed under his gaze. 'Tis not a story I enjoy. Naruto folded both arms before his chest. I can tell, but even so, you have a sister. The Eternal Queen winced, looking mighty guilty beneath his gaze. He could sense it all the same. I do. They had retired to their chambers for the evening, the both of them, the better to prevent any prying eyes from seeing, nor eager ears from listening. Rena had run off to God's nowhere, while Rena and Melina had insisted upon having a sleepover with Godric here in the capital. He wouldn't be surprised if the children were trying to eavesdrop. Let them. They probably wouldn't understand half of what was said here anyway. And if they did, well. They were strong girls. It wasn't as though they would be in any danger. Kurama chortled softly in the back of his head. Godric might be. Perhaps. Then again, perhaps not. Those two had taken a liking to the young scion of Stormvale and quickly taken him under their wing. He almost pitied him. His daughters were going to eat him alive when they grew up, sooner or later. On a normal night he might have taken Godwin's boy aside and given him some pointers, advice even, to endure the chaotic storm that was his daughter's. Tonight was not a normal night. He looked back to Marika. You didn't tell me. It was not a question. His wife made an unhappy noise and squirmed where she stood, studying her feet. I did not. ... She was going to make this absolutely difficult, wasn't she? And I never heard of this, sister, because you were not meant to. She flung up her arms and paced away from him with an exasperated sigh. She was an experiment, an accident, if you will. A mistake not like that. She amended hastily at his thunderous expression. It would help to think of her as a piece of me, one that caused me no end of trouble until Marika slew her god-slaying flame with destined death long ago. I had thought her dealt with. She turned back to him, muttering crossly. Clearly, I should have known better. She is me, after all. Why didn't you tell me? Because she looked up at him at last. I had hoped to forget her, hoped that she would learn her lesson and fade into obscurity. Marika, what? She flung up her arms. Do not stare at me so. Am I not the fairest in all the land? And with the biggest ego besides? Naturally, he chose not to say that. No one's questioning that. I'm more curious as what this promise is that she's on about. She blinked quickly. You do not know. No, and he didn't. Do you? She shook her head. I never met you until you came storming into my chambers that day. 'Tis possible you had a past with her, perhaps some sordid tryst you do not remember. You're not mad about that possibility. Why would I? She flicked her golden braid back over her shoulders. She is me. I am her. It merely means you loved me before you ever met me. There's that ego again. But she had her hand on him, distracting him. What is the first thing you remember of the lands between? That was the question, wasn't it? He'd not thought about his arrival here in years, never really had reason to. Trying to recall it now was difficult. He had to reach back decades just to recall it. Let me think. He thumbed his chin. I remember ... snow, darkness, cold. I think I was injured. The memory was fuzzy, dulled by time, but he could recall that much. No, I know I was. The more he leaned into his past, the more came back to him. Someone looked after me. I remember pale hands, but not a face. They had a soft voice. Oh, heavens. Whatever will I do with you? I suppose this makes you my guest. A chill shot down his spine. He shook his head, shrugging off the past. Pretty sure they told me about you massacred other people, including the fire giants. For which I will not apologize. Marika stomped a foot, producing a small crater under her heel. They were wicked, slovenly, drunken brutes who would have happily burned my tree to the ground for sits and giggles. This realm is well rid of them. If we can get back to the topic at hand, please. Yes, carry on. She waved a hand. Where were you? Well, after that I went straight to the capital and the rest is pretty much history. Good history. She hummed fondly, licking her lips. Bloody, insatiable woman. I'm pleased to see you haven't forgotten that at least. A quick step carried her to him, where she laid her head against his chest once more. It was a sign as much a please, a warning that she was feeling clingy, and he lazily looped an arm around her to mollify her temper. But as to the matter of your memory, it's entirely possible you did forget. You haven't been acting strangely, have you? No. His conscience gave him a good hard nudge. Speaking of strange, Godwin's been acting pretty odd. I'll have a word with him. She waved a hand. He is my firstborn. He will listen to any case. You haven't been acting strange at all. Perhaps those memories of your past were simply sealed away. He recoiled. By me? Not by your hand? No. She drew back, considered him for a long moment. Maybe you took a nasty blow to the end. Or perhaps. Her frown deepened now as she took him by the face with both hands, turning his head to one side. I see. ... See what? You gonna answer me? Marika leaned closer. He slapped her flank and she jolted back to reality with a start. Calm yourself. I was merely thinking. Quick as can be, she turned his head back to her. It seems someone put a very effective mental block on you, and I'd bet my crown it was her. I can't seem to undo it. She absently pinched at his cheek. As expected of me. She was most thorough. Can that beast of yours? I can't. Kurama almost sounded surprised. I didn't even notice it there until she pointed it out. Very subtle, but strong. What in blazes was it? He could feel something in the back of his head now that he'd been made aware of it. Not pain, but a gap, as though someone had reached inside his head and carved out a memory. The thought chilled him, more so that he might have willingly allowed it to happen. Well, there you have it. Clearly you made some sort of promise to this gloam-eyed queen, or should I say this piece of me. And now she's come to collect. She is our enemy, the gloam-eyed queen, Empyrean leader of the Godskin Apostles and the original owner of Destined Death. Do you understand this? He winced, worried by her tone. Marika, and the fact that she has returned means I was right all along. Her triumphant cry utterly baffled him. Victory is mine. His brain fizzled out. Huh, don't you see? She faced him with a smile bordering on euphoria. You fell in love with me from the first. We were always meant to be together. Her hands came together in a delighted clap. We merely need deal with this happy harpy of a harlot and remind her of her place in the order of things. And that is, she licked her lips. Beneath us, squirming in pleasure and crying out our names. Possibly with a baby or two in her belly. His face burned. Marika, honesty is the best policy, dear husband. She turned a smoldering grin upon him. I'm sure she'll lose her patience and come to claim you eventually. It's what I would do. His eyes widened. Are you using me as bait? There. She patted his bicep. Don't think of yourself as such, my dear consort eternal. You are but the honey meant to entice the beast, and I the steel trap that shall clamp down upon them, holding them down as I ravage their flesh. A beat of silence followed, and then Naruto arched an eyebrow. Do you have any idea how dirty that sounds? Marika opened her mouth to retort, closed it now. Perhaps you are right, and perhaps this piece of myself is more dangerous than I thought. Why, she might even seek to defile you. He laughed that. Boy, I'm hardly a virgin by this point. It was no use, and he realized what Marika wanted a moment later. She grabbed him by the hand and dragged him to the bed. We must protect your chastity. Naruto absolutely twitched. Oi. Reina took her ear from the door and looked to Melina with a most curious expression. What's chastity? Her sister's little face screwed up. At length she shrugged. I do not know, nor do I wish to. Hello, Waimon echoed from behind the door. The girls exchanged a disgusted glance. Yowa, that was all the excuse they needed to scarper back down the hall and well away from their parents' bedroom. Together they fled, from the noise as much of the images in their head. Reina broke the tableau first, skipping beside her sister. Are we going to have a baby brother? Melina shrugged. Possibly. It would be nice to have someone to boss around. Her head tilted. What would we even name him? Jaemin sounds like a grand name. I disagree. I prefer Gwyn. But, of course you do. Artorias sounds nice. As when the girls paused, together they looked back to young Godric. Their playmate had been wise enough to hold his tongue and follow them in stoic silence, letting them have it out among themselves without fear of turning their attention and their whims upon himself. No longer. Godwin's descendant gulped beneath their gaze. What? He shrugged a pale shoulder, trying to defend himself. It does. Reina and Melina looked among themselves, considering. A compromise, then. Indeed, dear sister. That sounds grand. Reina seeked her head anew, dark hair falling across one eye. Would you like to play tag, Godric? He shrugged with a rueful little smile. Against my better judgment. Yes. Melina beamed. Excellent. You're it. The boy balked. Why me? Because there's two of us and only one of you, silly. Their accord made, the children scarpered, fleeing deeper into the castle. None of them noticed the silent shadow detach itself from the wall behind them. None saw the assassin crane its neck after their retreating footsteps. None noticed the twisted black knife in their hand. She lingered there for a long moment, considering her options. Behind her lay Queen Marika and her consort, husband. Killing them would plunge the world into chaos. But they were no easy prey. She was alone in this corner of the castle, her fellows not yet present. Why risk herself? After all, yet 3 delectable targets had just passed by under her very nose. It felt like fate. With soundless footsteps, the black knife pivoted on her heel. After a moment's pause, she made her choice. She followed the children. As the children played, the lands between settled into a deep slumber. All the world slept, blissfully unaware of danger. And in the darkness, shadows silently stirred. A night of death. A night of infamy. So it began. The preparations have been made, Lord Godwin. Then let us begin, Fia. Narika's firstborn knelt before the corrupted altar, shed his deep blue robe, and took a deep breath to steel himself. The pain would only be temporary, he knew. This was necessary. Death was not the end, it was merely a gateway, a mean to transcend one's physical flesh and move to a higher plane. But due to that, one must die with him. The timing was paramount in that regard. One's flesh would die, and another's soul would be slain. He wished it hadn't come to this, but it was the only way to properly effect change in the lands between. This would hasten Godfrey's father's inevitable return and put things right. No more Naruto. No more of what he called peace, only the blessed crucible of war. His treacherous mother would pay for her betrayal, for her sins, for forsaking him, and all would be well. Sacrificing his flesh seemed a paltry price to pay in that regard. If the loss of his body was all he need give, then he would do so gladly. Raising his head, he spread his arms wide, exposing the broad shoulders of his back for the ritual. Electo, Titch. He intoned the names of his oldest, dearest friends. You may begin. Black knives gleamed in the moonlight. Their leader gave the signal. In unison, the blackened blades descended. The god died smiling. I am not my husband, and tonight I know not the meaning of mercy. Hear me, you little knives who would harm my family. I wish to play a game. Thus, I hereby declare, I forbid every person in a 100-meter radius from moving until I say the word now. Naturally, I'll kill anyone who violates that rule. Not yet. Still not yet. Now. Now, you may flee. Run for your very lives. Best be quick about it. I'll be right behind you. Marika, the eternal queen. I hereby declare. Death came for the gods. It did not announce itself with any sort of fanfare or pomposity, nor with celebrations and fireworks. It arrived with a whisper, came in the form of cloaked figures and black blades, of twisted knives and the screams of young children. Mommy, Daddy. Naruto burst from his bed with a snarl. Their children were screaming, wailing for help. Marika was only a heartbeat behind him, hammer in hand. Who dares? They took the news about as well as one might expect. And so it was, dearest reader, just like that. Hell was unleashed. Miquella flung the book down with an exasperated hiss. Blast it. Why is it so hard to find answers? Has even this library been censured? A door crashed open behind him. He turned on instinct, ducking a thrown dagger. It clattered harmlessly against the wall. An assassin. You have god timing. He rounded on them with a snarl. I needed to vent. Put these foolish ambitions to rest. Morgoth made an annoyed noise as he mowed down another assassin with his blade. It was a woman, judging by her death rattle, not that it mattered. Her kin kept coming, swarming over one another to get at him. All the while, they made scarcely a sound. It was unnatural, terrifying. Eerie. He sensed the death in their blades, knew that a single lethal blow would spell his end. But he could not move from this place. To flee now would not only guarantee his own demise, but that of others, the death of his wife in the room behind him, and the babe in her belly. He'd been looking forward to showing them to mother and father, indeed. Such was the reason he'd brought them to the capital at all. Doubtless these black knives. A pity, then, that these fools had chosen their target most poorly. His tail swept out, sending 9 killers sprawling. Even as they fell, his hand rose. A storm of golden swords materialized over his head. With a flick of his wrist he brought them crashing down. Villagers, emboldened by the flame of ambition. You shall not pass. The world burst into light. Godric was dying. Odd. He thought it would hurt more. In hindsight, the boy was vaguely aware of the wound he'd taken. He'd lost an eye and a good bit of his face besides. And yet there was almost no pain, nearly not at all. He'd been the one to fling himself forward after all, to leap into harm's way, throwing himself between Melina, Reyna, and the assassin's blade. He hadn't even realized he'd done anything until he did. They'd screamed as their spells sizzled harmlessly against the woman's cloak as she stabbed down for them. His body moved on its own. No one had controlled him. He'd willingly placed himself in harm's way and taken the death meant for them. The pain was a small price to pay. He was lesser. They were greater. His death wouldn't matter, but if anything happened to them. There was the pain now. His face ached and he crumpled to a knee with a low wheeze. His world was going gray. The girls were grabbing at him, babbling in his ear, slinging healing spells his way to rouse him, all for naught. You didn't lose half your face and live to tell the tale. It just wasn't done. At least he would die happy, knowing he'd saved someone. He was not worthless. He had purpose. He had achieved something before the end. The assassin tutted above them. Fool of a boy ... but your death will do. His ruined, ravaged face creaked in a smile at her. For you see, he saw something. You first. Godric perished a second later. As such, he did not see the golden hands close around the woman's head, nor hear the awful crack that followed as they twisted. He was very much dead by then, you see. Until he wasn't. That same palm touched his face and he lurched back to life with a cough. His face mended, the pain eased, and just like that, he found himself able to see again. Melina and Reyna wasted no time. They latched on tight and all but hauled him backwards to safety. He did well to last this long. A voice like warm sunlight praised him for his efforts. Leave the rest to me, now. Godric tried to speak. He really did. Melina and Reyna just beat him to it. The Elden Lord's daughters crowded in around him, chattering wildly. Godric, of all the reckless things you could do. Indeed, sister, he must never do that again. ... Were they worried about him? Through blurry eyes the battered boy beheld a familiar golden man standing before him. No, there were many of him, at least half a dozen moving to protect Melina and Reyna ... and even him, much to his surprise. Godric watched it all unfold seemingly in slow motion from there. He saw the assassins close with Naruto, lunging at him from nearly every angle. And the golden man smiled. A black knife swept in at his head, a twisted facsimile of its cold reflection gleaming in his left eye as it sought to blind him. Melina's father dodged at the last possible second, swaying aside as it whistled past, shearing a strand of golden hair from his head ... and drove a fist through their chest. They crumpled with a low groan as he tore his bloody limb free. Humming softly, Naruto crushed their heart in his first and turned to face the remainder. Would any of you care to talk? His smile was limpid, a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. A soft rasp was their sole response. It almost sounded like laughter. More fools this lot. No, well that's fine. Whiskered cheeks dimpled, unfazed by their foolishness. In that case ... you die. He swayed back from yet another wicked blade, flicked a hand out at them and cut theirs off at the wrist. No wait, he told a lie. He'd lopped their other arm off at the elbow. Couldn't very well swing a blade when you didn't have arms, now did you? The assassin didn't even have a chance to scream. His fist thundered into their face and they fell without a sound, only to be grabbed and swung like a flail, splattering 2 more against the wall. Before we continue, I'll ask one more time. He turned to face the rest, clutching a severed leg in his hand. Would anyone like to surrender? No one did. Good. Naruto backhanded one of the black knives hard enough to render them a stain on the ceiling and waded in, hands a blur of wind and wrath. He was calm yet fire, fury made manifest but ice incarnate. It was perhaps the most wonderful thing Godric had seen in his life. 3 words sprang to the forefront of his mind even as he protected Melina and Reyna. I want that. Do you? Now. A vicious scarlet sit gazed over the Elden Lord's shoulder. You're being awfully brave tonight. Godric quailed a little under such a primordial stare, but forced himself to meet it all the same. At length, the golden god smiled. Watch closely, then. Melina raised her blade, Rykard and Radon at her back. Together the trio stood their ground as the black knives closed in. Ranni pitched backward with a yelp, blasting a would-be killer in the face with a spell. Away, vermin. You shall not have us this night. The corpse of Grandsex twitched. Slowly but surely it began to move, rising like a puppet bound by many strings. Dragons, that is to say the truest of ancient dragons, did not rot, nor did their bodies. Their scales were stone, their bodies granite. Though they could be beaten and broken, their corpses did not crumble. They remained, a facet of the everlasting name bequeathed upon them by their Lord Placidus X. Dead though he might be, struck down by Godfrey himself, mind long gone to the heavens. The power his corpse held yet lingered on. Spurred by sorcery from afar, empowered the sacrifices of 100 souls slain in the darkest of rituals on this most unholy of nights, he finally began to move. First his tail, then his legs, followed by his arms, now his wings. Life, air in his lungs. It brought purpose to him. With a great and mighty roar, the zombie dragon grasped his fallen golden bolt and lumbered forward, crushing buildings in its wake. Many a knight tried to stop it and paid dearly for it, slapped aside like so many gnats at a feast. The dragon paid them no heed. Its target was the Ur-tree. Let death take them all. He would finish what he had started so long ago. The beast thought itself prepared. And it was, in a sense. Many were occupied this night. It was not, however, prepared for the giant golden fox that burst out and latched onto its neck. Hello, dinner. The Black Knives were panicking. They had descended upon Landel in great numbers, their task to kill but a single god. It mattered not who, so long as someone died this night alongside their Lord Godwin. To that end they had enlisted aid from other lands, promising riches and rewards to any who might aid them. Many were they who agreed. Mercenaries and miscreants, those who hated the Golden Order, even those who sought to spit in a god's eye. Most of these so-called recruits would die, of course, but the Knives had accepted that and spread themselves out among their ranks. They were distractions after all, and for a time it went so very well. Until here. Now, in this very moment, laughter filled the night, a high demented shriek of pure glee. It rose loud and lurid into the night, a woman's merry cackle filling the gloom, heard all over Landel. Listen, you lot. The leader of one such mercenary band cried, raising their voice for the first time this evening. I don't know who, but someone pissed off the Eternal Queen herself. Another tremor shook the capital and Grandsex went down with a pained roar as a giant golden fox barreled into him. Screw this. That wasn't part of the plan. Let's get out of here. I think not, said Queen appeared between two of them, well within arm's reach, and caught them by the face. The speaker and another mercenary imploded on themselves, coating her with blood. Everyone froze, rooted where they stood. I am not my husband, and tonight I know not the meaning of mercy. Burning golden eyes turned to regard each of them as the two titans fought in the background. Hear me, you little knives who would harm my family. I wish to play a game. The undead dragon and the golden fox came closer. Thus, I hereby declare, her voice rang with regal glee, I forbid every person in a 100-meter radius from moving until I say the word now. Naturally, I'll kill anyone who violates that rule. She raised her hands, palms outward, as though prepared to clap. What say you? Shall we play? Grandsex went down with a pained squeal less than a block away. Not yet. Hirama tackled him, tails coming perilously close to flattening the lot of them. Still not yet. A black knife died as rubble crushed their body. Now. Marika clapped her hands, allowing. Now, you may flee. Best be quick about it. I'll be right behind you. They fled. Needless to say, they didn't get far. 3 died as she skewered them with a spear of light. The rest tried to scatter and failed as they stumbled into barriers of golden light. Like a cat stalking a family of rate, she walked lazily after them, wearing an expression to match. You dare to touch my family, do you? Marika tilted her head a touch, teeth flashing in a dark rictus of a grin, a smile that would have made a monster cry. Know your place, fools. A snap of her fingers, and 2 more imploded. Tell you what, she thumbed her chin. Come at me. If any of you actually manage to hit me, I'll let you kill me. How does that sound, ants? None dared. No. She walked forward, the ground splintering with every step. Then we shall play another game. I tolerated your existence because I thought you knew better, did I not tell you? The plan has changed. I asked you to go forth and live your lives. But my mercy availed you not. You must truly want to die. Mongrels. She flicked a hammer and 3 assassins dissolved into greasy red smears at her feet. I meant to behead you with that ... You really are weak, it seems. I will admit to being rusty. She touched her free hand to her face, eyes suffused with a soft golden glow. In my heyday I could have killed you all with 1 finger. Now it seems my hammer will have to suffice. Naruto is busy playing with your pet dragon. Thank you for that distraction. I do not wish him to see me like this, to see what I was before we met. Her hammer pulverized another skull. You see, I am a cruel, greedy, selfish woman. I want to hold on to everyone and everything within my grasp. But thee, I reject thee. Crunch, I forsake thee. Thwack, I cast thee out ... of sight and mind. Bang, her hammer struck and the Elden Ring sang within her, sending another to the afterlife. The moon's shining bright tonight, don't you think? She smiled down at them. It's helping me see your pathetic selves most clearly. What's wrong? Isn't this what you wanted? I will play with you until your bones break, your muscles melt and your soul shatter. You should be grateful. It's not every day I deign to play with mortals. Her hammer rose, singing a mournful dirge, and she brought the hammer down. Screams filled the night. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification. so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.